All right, today on Half Fixed Garage, we're going to be swapping out this transmission cooler for this one. This is a lot bigger. This is going to be on our LB7 Duramax, but this can be done on anything. This is an Amazon special. So let's start getting this thing in here and see if it works. So you probably could just pop one of those Amazon coolers in here and splice them right into your factory lines if that's what you want to do. Some of mine are leaking, so some of the stuff we're going to be putting in today, we're going to be getting rid of the quick connects on the transmission, swapping those to AN fittings, some AN fittings to get us there, and then the hose. So I'm also going to bypass the cooler in the radiator. I don't think I need it. That cooler I'm putting in should be big enough to handle any heat we got, and I'm not worried about the trans, coming up to temperature faster. We're in Florida, so it's up to temperature basically when the truck's parked. So here's what we're working with. We'll start getting that radiator set in there. Like I said, we got to take some fittings out of the transmission and swap them over to AN. I'll show you guys that in a minute. All right, we got this thing just barely sitting in here. It's not tight or anything. You can see the difference in the size of the cooler there. So what I'm going to do is keep getting this thing in with these ugly little brackets they sent. I'll get everything mounted, and then I'll run it for a day or two. If everything's good, no leaks, we got some aluminum flat bar over here. We'll make some nicer mounts, but I'm not going to put all that time into it if this thing's not going to work. So I'll keep going with this. I'm going to bend these down, flip them the other way, bend them down so we can come into the factory bracket holes there. These are the factory bracket holes up here, and I'm going to have to slot this one because it's just a little too short. So let me slot that, get these in here, tighten it up, and we'll start running some new lines. So if you need to slot some cheesy little metal like this, and all you got's a step drill bit, easiest way to do it, just run it at an angle. Flip it over, run it at an angle back. It's not going to look great, but if you just need a slot. Easy as that. All right, here's where we're at. I've got these. You can get in there spaced off with a couple of oversized nuts so this thing sits a little straighter. These are just temporary. We're not keeping those ugly things. Rather than bend up these at an angle and make the mounts for the bottom, it's going to be easy enough just to make basically a little piece of angle out of the aluminum flat bar. So let me get set up. I'll cut a couple of those, put them in the vise, smack them in half. Then the cooler should be done until we come back and redo the top mounts, and we'll start running lines. I do have the AN fittings already put in here with some thread sealant. Let those start setting up, and I did blow it out with a little bit of air just to make sure there's no, wonton debris or anything left in there. Just making two lines. I'm going to cut it at the second line. The first line is where we're going to put it in the vise and smack it in half, or fold it in half rather. It's a little bit hot. Just a little bit. Weird. All right, got those bolted in. Those will line up and catch the bottom of that cooler perfectly. Paint them black, you won't even know they're there. Let me get this thing hung back in here. Probably just run a couple self tappers through this one at the bottom here. just real quick and easy and start doing some lines, because I'm running out of daylight here. All right, she's in there. She's tight. Next order of business is getting the quick connect fittings out of the transmission, getting these popped in, and then I've already got the straight fittings on the AN lines here put on. So once these are in, it's just a matter of running the lines to the trans, marking them where we got to cut them, and put a couple of 90-degree AN fittings on there. And those quick connects are going to be, if I can get you down here, right up there. So those are the fittings that we're going to be taking out and swapping out to AN. That's the plan anyway. Let's see if I can get these out. I'm not even 100% sure I have the right fitting. I'm like 78% sure. So we're going to do the top line first. Or that's the plan anyway. It'd be nice if it wasn't so dark down here. I know it doesn't look that bad on the camera, but the sun's about to go down. Okay. There we go. Actually, let me move you before you get transmission fluid all over you. Let's try this. There we go. Well, that was pretty painless. I thought that would be a fight. But do we have the right fitting? That is the next question. Let me grab a towel, clean that up just a little bit, and we'll see. Honestly, the fitting in my pocket looks too big. It's way too big. Cool. All right, we'll come back when we have fittings that work. All right, it's the next day. I actually have the right fittings for the AN lines now. So anybody trying to do this on a 5-speed Allison, this particular one's behind an LB7, you need a 10 ORB fitting to go into the transmission, and then whatever size AN fitting you're using. In this case, it's a 10. So 10 ORB to 10 AN. That'll go right into the transmission housing. Let me bust this other fitting in here, and then we just got to run some lines up to the front. All right, we got the fittings in the transmission. I've got a couple of long AN lines made up on one side. I'm going to loosely connect them to each side of the cooler, run them through, mark them where I got to cut them, and then I've got some 90-degree fittings to put on the end here to go into the transmission. But let me go ahead and cut these old factory lines out, and then we'll start getting the AN stuff in here. All right, let me show you what I got. I've done everything except make new brackets for these chintzy little ones that came with it. I already made some for the bottom. We've got the AN lines ran, and to see what this cooler actually does, we've got a sensor, temperature sensor here on the cooler outlet. So this is the cold half of the cooler going back to the trans. And then underneath the truck, you've got a sensor here, which is to the cooler. That's right out of the converter, straight into the cooler line. So that's going to be the hottest point for the transmission fluid. So I'll run a gauge into the truck so we can see what this cooler actually does. We'll get the temperature before the cooler, right at the trans where it's hottest, and then after the cooler. And of course, we ran the AN lines, put some heat wrap on them because they're real close to the exhaust here. So are the factory lines, but I was in here, so might as well. So let me get this thing buttoned up. Just put a gauge on the dash real quick. I don't have an A-pillar for it yet. We'll just let it flap in the breeze and see what this cooler does. All right, everything's done. We got some nice thick aluminum brackets. This thing doesn't move at all now. Much beefier than it was. They're not that bad for a quick 20-minute job. All that's left to do is test it. And we got that gauge installed in there. Let me show you that. We'll take this on a drive. I don't have a trailer to put behind it, but we got the gauge with cooler in, cooler out. And we'll see how good of a job this cooler actually does. All right, it is the next day for this trans cooler installation. And just to recap, we've bypassed the transmission cooler in the radiator altogether. It's no longer part of the circuit. We removed the secondary small cooler out of the front of the cooling stack in the grill and swapped in this Amazon 40K cooler. So the truck's warm. That's about as hot as she's gonna get today. It's about 85 degrees outside. And on some highway driving with this little caveman gauge, because I don't have an A-pillar yet, we're getting about 30 degrees cooling. And again, we get the red number is going to be the sensor right out of the transmission, right out of the converter, straight to the cooler line, about the hottest place you're going to get. Blue number is on the cold side of the cooler. So this review is basically just 100% how good can that 40K Amazon cooler do. And driving down the highway, we've got about 30 degrees cooling. It does get better in traffic. I'll show you that here in a minute. I've seen almost 60 degrees in some cases, which I assume is because the volume of the pump is slowing down. When you're at a stoplight, fluid spends more time in the cooler and therefore cools off more. So this is what we got driving down the highway. Doing about 65, 70. My speedo is off a little bit because of tire size, but not too bad. So once I get off the highway here, I'll get back with you and we'll show you the city temperatures. Alright, we're off the highway. Hopefully you can see those numbers okay. We're coming up to a stoplight here. We're just in the city again. About 160 and 130, so still doing about 30 degrees. We'll see if anything changes when we stop. About right, that's it for the 40K trans cooler review from Amazon with the trans cooler and the radiator deleted. So just the 40K cooler now. You can expect 30 to 40 degrees temperature drop while you're driving. Stopped in traffic, you know, you saw it on the gauge. We got close to 60, 50, 55, no problem. I'm pretty happy with that. So I know there's a lot of reviews, pictures out there, people just showing their in-truck gauges, the factory gauge, which is just a temp sensor either in the pan or maybe in the valve body. So we got one before and after the cooler here to see what it actually does. And 30 to 40 degrees while driving, 50 to 60 while you're stopped. I'm pretty happy with that. The outlet temperature today never hit 180. I put about 15, 20 miles on it. It got close, 177, 178, but never got hotter than that. The outlet side of the cooler, I think kissed 140 once or twice, but was mostly in the 130s while driving, all the way down to the low 100s when stopped. So overall, for the price, I'd say that's pretty good. We'll see how long it lasts. It's been in here for, I don't know, a couple weeks now. So if anything happens, if it shits the bed, starts leaking, blows up, we'll make another video about that.